Hey guys, how's it going? This is Todd with Shutterstock, and I'm going to be teaching you about how to properly expose an image, particularly using three different methods. You got your iris, you got your shutter, and you got your ISO. But in this video, I'm going to be teaching you specifically about the iris. So every lens is going to have an iris. Now that's also known as the aperture setting or your f-stop, sometimes a t-stop. Now if you have a manual lens, you'll notice on the side of the lens you'll have a ring, and that'll have numbers going all up and down the side of it. Now that corresponds with your f-stop. Now an f-stop is a measurement of the amount of light that you're letting through the lens and to hit the camera sensor. The absolute fastest way to overexpose an image, which is where you have a very blown out image, is to not set your aperture or your iris appropriately. Whether it be with a manual style lens like this one or a powered DSLR style lens where you change the aperture setting in the camera body itself, and the f-stop that you have on your lens corresponds with the exact size of that aperture. A higher number is going to be a much smaller hole, and a much lower number is going to be a really big hole, sometimes all the way to wide open. But your f-stop also affects much more than just the brightness of the image. It also affects a thing called depth of field. Simply put, depth of field is the amount of distance that your lens is able to keep in focus at any given time. So you have the field, and as you move your focus ring, you're shifting that field forward and back in Z space. So you can have a really shallow depth of field or a really deep, wide depth of field. So what does that mean? Well, basically, the wider your aperture setting, the shallower your depth of field is going to be. So a lot of DPs and photographers love to shoot as wide open as they can. It makes the background really out of focus and beautiful, and it gives everything a really cinematic and beautiful look. So say you had a piece of paper and you were shining a really bright light into it, and then you poked a really tiny hole in that piece of paper. Well, what would happen is the light that shines through is going to be really sharp. You're going to see some really crisp edges around the light that's shining through. Now, if you were to take that same piece of paper and that same light and shine it through a much bigger, wider hole, basically you're getting more light that's bending around that hole, and you're going to get a much softer, less focused beam. So this is exactly how a lens works. Basically, you have light that's filtering in through the lens. It's being collimated and bended in certain ways. And if you have a much wider hole that light's coming through, it's just gonna look a lot softer. So you don't always want the background to be super out of focus. Like if you're doing a big wide shot, you can just stop down your lens and there you go. You have a really nice, big, wide, sharp image. Now let's say you're out in really bright sunlight and you want to have shallow depth of field. What we have for that is a really nice little trick called a neutral density filter, which is basically like putting sunglasses on your camera. And this one is one of my favorite kind to use. It's called a variable ND, and basically what that does is as you turn it, it becomes brighter or darker. So you can stick this on the end of your lens and darken your image while still maintaining the exact same depth of field. So definitely start experimenting with different aperture settings. I think you'll find that it gives you an extra layer of control with the things that you're shooting beyond just darkening or brightening your image. And as always guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.